Your brain was not built for this. Not the office. Not the screen. Not the schedule. Not the feeling of being surrounded by people and somehow completely alone. Every system inside your head was designed by 300,000 years of a completely different life. And when you take a brain built for that world and drop it into this one, something breaks. Researchers have a clinical name for it. Ancient humans just called it Tuesday. Depression is now the leading cause of disability on Earth. It affects 280 million people. Rates have been climbing every single decade since we started measuring them. They are highest in the wealthiest, most medicated, most comfortable countries in the world. And when researchers go looking for comparable numbers in the last surviving hunter-gatherer societies, people with no hospitals, no antidepressants, no therapists, no concept of a work week, they find something the data cannot cleanly explain. The rates are close to zero. This is not an argument against medicine. It is not a plea to go live in the woods. It is something more uncomfortable than either of those things. It is the possibility that depression, at the scale we now experience it, is not a malfunction of the human brain. It is the human brain functioning exactly as designed, inside a world it was never designed for. In 1968, an anthropologist named Richard Lee published years of field data on the Kung Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert. He had tracked their time, their behavior, and their social lives down to the minute. What he found did not match what he expected. These were people living with almost nothing by any modern measure. No running water, no shelter beyond grass huts, no stored food, no safety net of any kind. And yet, the psychological profile of the camp looked nothing like deprivation. It looked, by almost every behavioral measure, like contentment. He was not alone in finding this. Every researcher who has spent extended time living inside a functioning hunter-gatherer community comes back reporting the same thing. Not that these people are free from suffering. They get sick. They lose children. They grieve. But the specific flavor of suffering that now fills our hospitals and pharmaceuticals, the low-grade persistent emptiness, the inability to feel pleasure, the sense that life is happening to someone else while you watch, that specific thing is almost nowhere to be found. The question is why? And the answer starts with how the human brain actually works. Your brain is not a thinking machine that also has feelings. It is a social survival machine that uses thinking as a tool. For 300,000 years, the single most important variable in whether you lived or died was not your physical strength. It was not your speed. It was the quality of your relationships inside your group. A human alone on the savannah was a dead human. A human inside a functioning band of 25 to 30 people who trusted each other was the most dangerous animal on the planet. So the brain built an alarm system calibrated to one specific threat: social disconnection. When you feel isolated, when you sense that you are peripheral to your group, when you feel unseen or unneeded, your brain reads that signal the same way it reads physical danger. It floods your system with the same stress hormones. It disrupts your sleep. It flattens your appetite. It makes the future look dark. Because for the brain you inherited, a dark future was the correct prediction for a human who was losing their place in the group. That alarm system has a name now. We call it depression. And for most of human history, it worked. It was not a disease. It was a signal. A precise, targeted warning that your most critical survival resource, other people, was slipping away. And in a band of 25 people who had known each other their entire lives, that signal almost always had a real cause that could be addressed. You had genuinely drifted from your group. You had genuinely lost status or connection. The alarm rang, you noticed, you repaired it, and the alarm stopped. The Kung had a mechanism for this that Lee documented carefully. When a person in the camp was struggling, the group did not wait for them to ask for help. Asking for help was not how it worked. The group simply closed in. People visited more. Conversations stretched longer. Physical contact increased. The struggling person was not identified as sick or broken. They were just quietly surrounded until the weight lifted. Lee watched this happen multiple times and noted that the recovery speed was, by any clinical standard, remarkable. This is not a coincidence. It is the system working exactly as it was built to work. The brain sends the alarm. The group responds. The alarm resolves. Now look at what we have done to that system. The average American has fewer than 3 people they consider close friends. In 1985, that number was closer to 10. In 2021, a survey found that 61% of Americans reported feeling lonely. Not occasionally, chronically. The alarm that was designed to fire briefly and then resolve is now firing continuously in tens of millions of people with no resolution available. Because the thing that was supposed to resolve it, a close, consistent, physically present social group that notices when you are struggling and closes in without being asked, has been almost completely dismantled by the way modern life is structured. We moved for jobs. We built houses designed for isolation. We replaced face-to-face contact with communication that provides the appearance of connection without the biological ingredients that make connection real. And then we handed everyone a device that made the replacement feel almost real enough to accept. Stop, because this is the part that makes this harder to fix than it sounds. A screen gives you faces, voices, reactions, the surface texture of social contact with none of the biological weight. Your brain's social circuitry was built to read body temperature, breathing rate, pupil dilation, the micro-expressions that cross a face in a fraction of a second in the presence of someone who is physically with you. None of that transmits through a phone. But the simulation is close enough that your brain half-registers it and stops sending the loudest version of the alarm. Not because the need is met, because the alarm has been partially, temporarily quieted by something that looks like food but carries no nutrition. You can have 800 followers and activate none of the neural pathways that your brain requires to feel socially safe. And so millions of people exist in a state that has no real analog in the world the brain was built for. Not fully connected, not fully isolated, suspended in a simulation of social life that is just convincing enough to prevent them from seeking the real version. The alarm does not ring loud enough to demand action. It just runs. Low, constant, and unresolved. A drain with no off switch. The Kung did not have a word for this. Not because they were simple, because they never built a world capable of producing it. Every structural feature of their daily life, the small group, the physical proximity, the shared meals, the hours of unstructured conversation, the way the group moved toward a struggling member without being asked, was doing the biological work that we have now outsourced to pills and therapy and self-help books and a medical system that treats the alarm as the disease rather than the signal. This is not the fault of anyone alive. The world was built by people trying to solve real problems. Disease, famine, physical danger. They solved those problems brilliantly. Nobody thought to ask what would happen to the social nervous system of a tribal primate when you removed the tribe. Now we know. The brain you are running is not broken. It is a masterpiece of engineering built for a specific set of conditions. Put it in those conditions and it performs exactly as designed. The Kung proved that. The Hadza proved that. Every functioning hunter-gatherer community ever studied proves that. The same hardware, a completely different outcome. You cannot rebuild the Kalahari, but you can understand what the alarm is actually telling you. It is not telling you that something is wrong with you. It is telling you that something is missing around you. That is a different problem. And different problems have different solutions. The ancient answer was never medication. It was never isolation. It was never performing wellness at strangers on a screen. It was proximity, consistency, being known by a small number of people over a long period of time in a way that made your presence in the group feel necessary. That need did not evolve out of you. It is still there, running the same code it has always run, waiting for the conditions it was built to operate inside. The alarm was never the disease. It was the directions home.